What's up, guys? How's everybody doing tonight? Right on. Well, that worked unexpectedly well. So,
Right up.
so it should be, yeah, that's good. How are you doing, Bill? Good to finally meet you.
Same. I'm doing well. So,
I'm good, man. Always good. The yeah. So I think it'll be I think there's nothing to it, man, but just to jump into, I have a feeling that an hour is going to go by pretty quick with this. Give guys some history for people listening. There's a video that was out on the internet that was a training video from 2019 of CQB of one specific like hostage rescue hit training evolution team hit on a single residence. Pretty straightforward. And it's been out, guys. It's been going around, and then Bill, you saw it. Somebody I think sent it to you, or how'd you come across that video?
yeah, compadre sent it over to me.
Yeah, send it over to him, and then Bill, you did a critique video of it that had some pretty interesting, takes on it. I think some of them, obviously I don't agree with, and I think it at least warrants it. It's a decent conversation. So introduce guys, like I think to I'll let you introduce yourself to everybody listening because you haven't had you on before, and I don't think we really share a lot of the same followings, like in terms of the social media. And I'm definitely not up on YouTube the way you are. But who are you? And like background as much as you want to give, or as little as you want to give.
Right on. Everybody, I'm Stoker, Bill. I've been called worse over the years. Uh, just retired from the military, but my wife 27 years, got 3 kids, and I chew dirt and play out in the woods.
Right on. And that's where I think even in the video you said you primarily focus on kind of survival stuff and like fieldcraft type things,
Yeah, field craft.
but I think before we, to have this conversation too, right? Because we're talking about, some of it's theory based, a lot of it is experience based. At least that's how I look at like kind of TTPs. So to have this, I'm not a big proponent of like, hey, this is my background, this is what I do. But I think when we talk about tactics, you have to, especially with some of the things that I have that you said from the video, we have to talk about like your backgrounds, right? Guys that know mine, I was in the Navy for 17 years. I did my last 9 in the Army, and my last, you know, 12 and a half years were done as an assaulter at an Army Special Mission Unit, right? And that kind of, so for me, my entire career, from 95 when I was in a force platoon, it was that CQB, and it just kind of went to there. I got out, retired, still work an operational job, still have CQB as one of the medals that I have to maintain and continue to train, right? So that's my background. So for you, in terms of like your CQB, like where does that play in? Like where do your kind of your ideas and experiences come from?
So I mean, it goes back to mid to late '90s to early 2000s when I was still in the Marine Corps. By the way, I was a foreman. There were some good dudes of mine. Spent most of the time the first fleet anti-terror security team, or otherwise fake ass SEAL team, out of Norfolk, Virginia.
Yeah. So Fast Company, right? For guys that don't know, and stop me if anything I'm saying is wrong. Fast Company is fleet anti-terrorism security teams. They basically are charged with having a response, but the focus is primarily, defensive in nature, taking and defending nuclear weapons, the arsenal, and then also there's a reaction team, right? It's like RTT or something like that, which is like a global response for contingency.
Right. So the majority of the battalion is pre-stationed at different locations, guarding nukes, doing refuel, defuel operations. The fast platoons did a rotation 6 months at a time to pre-position in either Italy, in Spain, or in Japan, and just kind of staged forward, ready to go, one platoon at a time. Primary purpose would be for response to things like Nairobi and Kenya, those bombings, the Cole embassy bombing. So there's a lot of reaction and support and defense that is probably a bigger role, if you will.
Okay. But responding to the embassies, right?
Yeah, typically responding to doing non-combatant evacuation operations of embassies. Like they didn't release who's down in Haiti right now, but odds are it's a fast platoon. When I was in, did our tour or our deployment to Naples, and we did a short mission up to Gaeta to the 7th Fleet, which is kind of before any threats kind of took place. So it was a little bit different for what we were able to do. Before I got there, dudes were in Macedonia, and then after I left, the dudes were in Macedonia, but primarily embassy, additional security based off of level of threats.
Okay. And then how long were you in the Marine Corps for?
So 8 years, and then I had an 8-year break, and then in 2010 came back in our Army.
So any of the Marine Corps stuff, were you fast the whole time?
No, so I started off as a mechanic, and then about 2.5, 3 years in, switched over to started off as a weapons instructor for the security team at NSGA Northwest, and then a spot opened up at the fast team, so I was able to make my way up there.
Okay.
And the whole time in communications and signals.
Okay. So ever in any of those jobs, like outside of the time you had at Fast as an instructor and like a CQB team leader, I think you said in the video, like
Yeah.
was any of that like operational, like hitting targets in GWAT or anything like that?
For GWAT, no. I got out in late 02, early 03. I was still on terminal leave. So really the only operational experience outside of institutional going into operation was all from my deployment with Fast Company to Europe.
Okay. So that's for me that's like an important thing, to especially we're gonna talk about the video now, is that there's with the internet, right? And especially YouTube, there are a lot of guys like I would historically refer to this stuff as like everybody on the internet has very, very high opinion, right? And they bark it out loud. Video you made, production value of the video made was super high, right? It's good, kind of a video breakdown, audio and all that stuff. But the opinion's good, and nothing to get you look the part, beard, everything, right? It's so when you start talking like that, it's very easy for guys. What I hear, guys that say that they put stuff out and then everyone takes it as gospel. So I think it's important to kind of when you start to dig into some of the experiences, because our experiences drive everything, right? It's going to drive our opinions, especially when it comes to tactics, I think, right? Mine is based off of what I've done, right? So anytime I have guys like in the tactics world that are telling me, hey, this will never happen. When it's like, okay, but I've seen it happen 500 times. So how does it never happen, right? Because there's differences, right? Like what happens in the schoolhouse. And I think we came up, for me in the early 90s, kind of Force Recon held the keys. We talked about this in a phone call, the keys to kind of CQB training, right? In that shoot house. And that information was shared. And I think at that time, a lot of it came from, I think the Delta Platoon, LA SWAT. What?
Old Dick Morchenko.
Oh, yeah. No, that was like, yeah, that's SEAL Team 6 stuff. But I think, we had a very system, it's points of domination, CQB, with Hall Boss kind of, at that time, it was called initiative-based tactics.
Yeah.
And I think it's for the last place I worked, we were really consistent with a lot of those things in terms of points of domination, right? And how we did business, right? So for the video that we're going to talk about, right, that was a initial hit, kind of like warm-up hits, daytime, just team hits. So I kind of read through some of the comments on the videos, and guys are like, well, you could have a helo circling around and kind of sneak in and all the shit. It's like, no, you couldn't. You would never do that. You would never inoculate him to noise. One, it's a hostage rescue, right? Time is of the essence. We don't get to decide where the hostages are being held. Can't drop a hawk on the X, which is what we would want to do. We'd want to park them all right out in front of the door. So it had to be a Y landing, which happened to be, hey, we're 200 meters away, 150 meters away from that target. So now it's closing that distance and stealing that time back because we gave up surprise. So now we're leveraging speed as the initial assault. One of the things I want to ask you, because it comes up a few times in the video, do you feel like that video, that training event was scripted?
Only in as much as um, anything that I've ever done has been scripted. Like you go on plan, you have your op order, and you go through all your concept operations, and everybody knows what their job is going to be going in. But outside of that, I don't think
Yeah.
so.
So the way that kind of evolution works is there's a series of targets. They're all over the place, right? They're probably 60 to 80 miles within our central hub, which is usually an airport that we're launching from. The way that the level of planning is literally you're on a matrix. Hey, you're up. You're on 9-2. You're going to this target. You look at the LZs. It's a plain side debrief on the top. Pass out GRGs. Everybody puts them into their sleeve, and then you say, hey, this is where we're landing. As we go out, we're going to look for a breach on whatever the north side, and then it's really though as the situation unfolds, like in this one, you make decisions on the fly, right? So
Yeah,
as we're approaching it, the first comment you kind of make, it's like a wide landing, and then we're sprinting to the target, which for me, from an operational standpoint, that is 100% doctrinally correct,
yeah.
right?
You got to
It's
just
a wide landing, and we're running there. Now, what we saw was they heard the helo, they know they're coming. The guys, the role players that we use are actually law enforcement officers,
right on.
right? So they have some training. Those guys were, I think it was a mix of some of. There was one military guy who was the puck, and then everybody else is kind of cops from their SWAT team that is aggressing us. So as we come up, the first thing you say, right, it's like, hey, we're shooting Sims, but they're not really Sims. Why do you think we're not shooting Sims?
Uh, to be honest with you, as it progressed a little bit further, well, so I'm sure that there's more simulation out there than I've had experience with. Um,
Yeah,
but
they're
go ahead.
the 5.56 Sims now, like UTMs and Sims, those were actually simunition rounds, right? And it's a marking round, a paint marking round. They fly good. I think the Sims, it's basically a blue bolt. You drop it in, and you can pretty much accurately engage to about 70 meters, and then
Damn.
wind and stuff starts affecting it. So it was Sims, right, coming up, and what I saw is I saw a guy milling around, right? And in the camera angle, the little Insta camera has that I'm wearing on my head has a pretty, narrow
Wide
field. Yeah, it's actually narrow. It's more narrow than your eyes,
right on.
right? If you figure your eyes are about 135, this sits at about 110. So it's a little bit deceiving, but the first shots I took were at about 30 meters, right? And now talking about it, I can only after the fact we kind of asked because we get debriefed on every single run, right?
Yeah.
It's if it's paper, they take down all the paper, they bundle it up so you can see where the hits are at the end of the night, and then you get a debrief from a site controller based off the role players. And as we're running up, kind of the confusion we saw one guy outside, and you could see there was a line of people who are
Yeah.
observers that are kind of standing off to the side. Seen it before. Hey, they're not in play. This guy's in play. Took some shots at him. He was actually supposed to be in the house, right? He walked outside to see when we were coming to kind of alert everybody. And what he sees is that's a 5-man team basically running, sprinting in a wedge. And then the first two shots that I took hit him. And then as we got closer, he looked at the site controller like, hey, should I lay down? And then it was not only myself shooting, but there was a guy to my right, a little bit behind me, that also engaged him and ended up shooting him. So one of the things we look at like is in terms of like I think a classic approach, that would be way more deliberate, right? The way that target's set up, if you look at it, there is a wooden door for us to breach in the center of the house, right? But as the situation unfolded, we saw we have a wooden door in the center, or I can hit this target from one side of it and clear in one direction where I don't have to really be concerned about a PDC. I'm just going to push through it like a tube, right? And that's kind of what I made the decision or chose to do, right? As we come up outside the door, um, the first thing you kind of hit me on was what happened in that first room. Like, give me your opinion about what you saw in that first room.
So quickly, Main Street was past the door, taking out a target to your right in that corner. And
Yep.
then obviously, and it should be noted that when you only have a first person point of view camera, you have no knowledge and no perception of what anybody else is doing, right? And
Yeah. No. Yeah. No, it
like
is.
huge. And then immediately going into, I think it was a hallway, maybe a kitchen area.
Yeah. 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 So let's go to the first room, though, right? So first room comes in, right? I am a right-handed shooter. As I'm making entrance into the room, my thought process is I crossing that threshold, I am going to be as absolutely dynamic as I can be, ready to fight, connected to the gun and everything. Um, so coming in, right, as soon as I looked into the room, it was a little bit on the darker side, right? I couldn't really see, but as I came back and I activate my light, I'm outside the room. I consider I've already entered the room. So that kind of made how aggressive that movement was going to be. But what I saw the door and the corner on the left, and I saw all the way the corner on the right to set myself up for success. If I go to my right, that is the easiest collapse for a right-handed shooter to traverse my primary sector,
Mm.
right? So when I came in, right, and this has been my experience over, hundreds and hundreds of hits, what you present to the adversary, they react to. And what I saw were guys, that dude did not believe what just came through that door. And he did not want any piece of it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And one of the things that you kind of reference at like failure drills, right? Are you talking about like you thought that I was shooting him twice in the body and once to the head?
To be honest with you, I don't recall the context of the statement.
Oh, you said like, oh, I don't know. He's shooting failure drills. I don't know why it is. Like our standard kind of like CQB thing is each target's 3 to 5 rounds, right? From an initial training standpoint, it's 2 rounds for every target, right? And that way you're able to, on a 4-man team, you can score targets like who all should have shot targets in this sector and that sector. So they kind of mitigate it with that. But as teams progress, right, and you're actually running with an operational team, kind of 3 to 5 rounds. So for me, I'm like, I am going to take the kind of highest percentage shot at all costs. You
Yeah,
know,
why not?
I'm looking for center mass, based off the attitude, and 3 to 5 rounds is how I'm going to kind of engage there.
Right on.
So when you come in to the right, and the reason you kind of dinged me on it, you said he just goes straight to the door, right? That was a small room, right? That room was probably 10 by 10.
Yeah, if
And
that.
there, what you don't see is I go to the door. What I look and see at that door is I see the rest of the team is on my left side, and I see a door that opens where they all are.
Right
So
on.
that cues, hey, I'm gonna underarm assault, open this door up, get it out of the way. We need to get a foothold into this house, right? Didn't know it's unknown floor plan, didn't know shit that was in there. And the very next thing, we go in and it's a guy in the kitchen. And you kind of to jump to the back of the video, you made a statement about one thing you don't like is the military training push guys where you're always going to win, right? And you talked about when you did your final kind of FTX for your CQB training that you were going up against the instructors,
Yeah.
right? So why do you think it's like? Have you had training evolutions where you didn't win?
Um. So I mean, outside of Hell Week and CQB school, it depends on what you constitute as a win.
Yeah.
There's certainly
I mean,
been lots of hard lessons learned, you know.
yeah, but I know for me, right? So one of the principles of how we train, right? If I get shot with Sims, it's I'm reacting to everything as reality, right? You you shoot me with Sims, am I disabled? Absolutely not. I'm going to continue to push my agenda on you. You know what I mean? So like for me, yeah, we win. I have won every fucking training event I have ever done across my entire career. Right? We don't ever pull off the target with not all the targets engaged or not getting the PC if it's a hostage rescue. So I think it's like part of me agrees like you want training to be difficult by all means, right? You want it to be difficult and challenging. But have you done? I think if for the way that place looks at training, because you mentioned too, like not one. You said no casualties. Where does that happen? Right? Are you talking about in training or in reality?
So both.
So in reality, like almost every time, there's no casualties. Like that's the goal, right? Right? Is
That
we
is,
set Yeah, so, but it's funny, when guys hear that, where does that happen? And I'll tell you, for the thousands of hits I've gone on, like 98% of the time, there are no casualties on our side. That is the goal. So it happens quite frequently. And I think it's that mentality is kind of, it's like a nascent, like underdeveloped mentality. Like, oh, we're going to take casualties. Where I don't think anyone trains like that.
well,
Right?
it's never acceptable, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, I don't think it is. But I also don't think it's, you know, for the same reasons. Like, I don't practice injure shooter drills, right? It's not a thing, honestly, in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I think you can practice shooting strong hand only, weak hand only, like from a practical standpoint, that makes sense. It's a skill. But this idea where what I always often see with the tactical world, and maybe you've seen it, you start layering all of this kind of nonsense on top of your training, especially if it's a scenario based training, to where you're not doing train. The whole training is just contingencies, right? Like you've seen it, right? You tape your hand up and put fake blood on it, right? Those are just modifiers that don't make any fucking sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, now I gave you something to do after this iteration. When we move past this, now you get to go clean yourself up for the next evolution, right?
Right.
Because I don't think that's a thing, right? And having seen guys, that take rifle rounds to the hands and shit like that, um, I don't see that training as like being valuable in terms of like, do you think that stuff is like those types of contingencies are good to go, like with training?
Uh, I would say one should be cautious on if you're going to run uh, whatever contingency you want. If it's overly staged and then the value is gone, right? If you have to stop, right, stop camera, we got to go set something up. Now you're now you're injured. Let's get you wrapped up. Like you just lost everything. So I would not disagree that doing strong hand, weak hand shooting, you're kind of getting after the same things in a fundamental way as opposed
Yeah.
to stage something and then going after.
Yeah, I think a lot of times the fundamentals aren't there and guys want to start layering stuff on it so that's how they think the training is valuable, but the foundational stuff isn't there to get it. And you mentioned right about your instructors, fighting your instructors, right, and they know your tactics. So with that being said, like in those training events, how did you guys fare against your instructors?
Oh, not well.
Right. How do you think those instructors would fare against like a troop of Saber Squadron guys assaulting, and they know what we're about to do?
Not well. Like whether or not you as them as op four or them?
Yeah. Because what I suspect happens, right, is the instructors are like shooting through little
Yeah,
tiny ports, right, or bladed off on the thing. Where I get it, right? That's in my mind, like that's entertainment, right?
right,
They're just dialing up the suck factor because if you're completely bladed at it, right, and I shoot you through the door jamb, it reacts. But with Sims, it doesn't, right? You can get behind a couch and have your gun up there and shoot that, and you think you're gonna, okay, yeah, hey, you shot me. It's like, dude, you were dead from when I was outside the room
right.
because those rounds come through the couch, right? And
Yeah,
that's something that we see, a lot of, right? That's why I think you like to have either professional role player companies or like other trained guys, like a SWAT team that, especially a full-time SWAT team that thinks they're good. That's like, hey, we got this shit down, and we're like, that is what we want. I want confidence level to be up, right? And then now you just react to what we do, and we're going to react to what you do,
right.
right? And they're kind of brief, like, hey, because you made a comment too. That's why I asked if it was. You said no one's wearing a mask, right? Well, every role player there has a mask on,
Okay,
but
but
as an operator, never. Never once did I wear full face protection. I wore exactly what I assaulted in, right? And that's where I think the difference level between what you would see in CQB at Fast Company or even Force Recon or MARSA, right? It's your ORM, your operational risk management, the matrix wouldn't allow you to do business the way that we do it,
sure,
right? So you
sure,
put the face shield on, you put on protective gear and all this shit, and we just didn't. You'd never do that, right? And Ben, you do take rounds in the face or whatever, but if it doesn't hit your eyes, you're fine. It stings a little bit. But it's just it's a modifier. But for us, I think it's important for me personally when I'm doing CQB or any tactics, I want it to be as realistic as what I'm going to bring to the fight. Right?
sure.
Obviously, I'm losing recoil. I'm losing maybe a little bit of distance, on my barrel because I don't have the suppressor on. So I've got a little bit better maneuvering and shit like that. But everything else is pretty similar. So just to kind of clear that up, because I think towards the end, um, it it got to where what did hold on, I'll get to that in a minute. The All right, so the first room, then we go through that, and you said, hey, why would somebody be in the kitchen? Have you ever been a role player before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you sit in a role player, right? How long do you think guys like stay alert and aware?
Uh, well, you certainly become aware when you hear a helicopter landing.
You do, right? Yeah. You do hear the helicopter land, but what do you think those cops think that approach is going to look like?
I would be concerned about where it's coming from, right? And then I would try to be
Right.
getting in a posture, not cupcake and
Yeah.
lollipop, making bacon.
So I think the guy in the kitchen, if you look at it, he was covering what he perceived was the main breach,
Right on.
right? He's probably told not to be in that room, because there was nobody in that big room, the living room, because if we explosively breach in there, so I think he's set up on the door, and as we come from the other way, it completely catches him off guard, right? So I don't really think he was like uh lollipop cupcake in her lolly pocket, whatever he said. I think in his mind, he was getting ready for it, right? He was about to eat a charge, in another room, and then when the door opened behind him, there's just nothing in him for him. So I think that's a difference. I also believe that a lot of these guys think the approach is going to be slow and methodical, right? That it's going to be a move like a formation up to the target. And I'll tell you, like from a hostage rescue standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
it's never like that. It's
Yeah.
just not. There's not one thing from that unit specifically. Like even if we walk in on a hostage rescue to maintain the initiative, right, of surprise, then but once the commencement of the assault, it's like it's nasty
Yeah.
fast. And I think it has to be, right? Um, so going through after the kitchen room, the dark room. I want to hear your thoughts about what happened in that big dark room.
As I recall, you had a weapons malfunction.
After that was in the hallway. So we come into the dark room, the big dark room. We opened it up, and I went straight, came up on my primary, collapsed to
Yeah.
1 meter off of what was the 3 and 5 guy. They were right off my shoulder. Came to them, then I pushed my gun back to look behind the dead space, and that's when I caught out of the corner of my eye another guy had the door jamb lit up, and there was a guy there. We went back to him and shot him and closed on him. Right. So how did that look to you?
Uh, Back up. I thought that was really good shit. With your immediate action and letting the team keep pushing through, and you got back in the fight really fucking quick.
Yeah,
I thought that.
that's just the Sims, whatever. You can
Yeah,
put enough oil on it. So I came up, had engaged him, and then as I would have normally progressed down that hallway, um, went couldn't put the gun back on safe, so lowered it and came around outside of it. No harm, no foul, and then came into the other room. And you even said, "Hey, that room was more set up conventionally." Now understand, like at that point, the two guys that went into that room were our lower IC positions, right? Those are new guys. Like
mm-hmm.
I think it was a 4 and a 5 IC. So doctrinally, like right, they go and they're tight, they're collapsing, and I believe like they're still like, okay, this room's good. They don't want to make a mistake. They come back out, right? So now this is the one that kind of gets me. As I come out of the hallway, right? Talk me through what you saw there.
Going the hallway towards the last room.
Yep. So I come out of the hallway, and you had a lot of comments, right? You where is it? Hold on, I got yeah,
Probably something
yeah.
about
This is
room.
where you called me 50 Shades of fucked up,
Oh,
and it's like so we come out of the hallway, right? It's a dark hallway, and I do not have nods on my helmet, right? It's a dark hallway. And this is where I think, too, the understanding, like my understanding of CQB, I will tell you, is completely different than yours. That's not a byproduct. That's not like a positive thing I'm saying about me, but it's unique to my experiences over the time that I've done it, right? We
sure,
can't have the same view of it because we didn't work in the same places, and I did it for, as long as I did it, and you did it for as long as you did. So when I come out of the hallway, right, I have to see where I'm going, right? And you make a comment like if you said my light, so my gun is angled down for my setup, my light is on the right hand side of my gun, right? It's
okay,
right hand at 12 o'clock. I light it up. The light 100%, the gun is angled down, the light is hitting the back of his legs, right? To see where I need to go. Right? To me, I don't consider I'm not muzzling him, right? I am pointing a gun down. I'm not going to have the gun up. None of that stupid shit. That is not what that building prescribes or anything. Moving down, but you said why would you do that? Your weapon is on fire. The light is on. Would you guys typically move through the house with your weapon on fire?
yeah,
That to me, that's fucking retarded. That shows like you don't possess and understand. Like one, you're violating a fucking weapon safety rule. Weapons on safety are up on target with the intention to shoot. Boom. That's day one rifle shit right there. Right. So if you are going through the house with the weapon on fire, like you're asking for, any confined space fighting, you're going to muzzle people. There is no way to do it where you're not doing it, right? We got a team full of guys, right? The guy that was at the end of the hallway, he's 6'5", 240 pounds. I'm 6 foot, 230 pounds. Like we don't fit in there,
yeah,
right? Where everybody's got a clear lane and clear sector. So I think from a standpoint, like to me, that's like an organizational thing. If that is what Fast Company at that time, to me, right off the bat, and I know this because of Fast, you guys don't do CQB, right? You train CQB, you 100% train it, but in terms of going up against an armed adversary, I will tell you from my experience, blown out to embassies 2 times in my career, Fast Company was never around. No one was around. if it's an embassy that's being held or under attack, they do not call a fast company. Would you agree with that?
I don't know that I have historical knowledge to say yes or no.
I mean, I think that is a hostage rescue, right? It's a American diplomats, AMSITs inside an embassy that's under attack, a consulate. It's not. I think if you were to look at the order of succession of numbers that they dial, um, a fast company, even parked in Sigonella, is not getting that job if we're flying to Sigonella. Like, I just don't think that's the case. I think that's the reality of it. You know, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's like you got guys
So,
just from a resource.
there's two different job sets, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with that. But you would say from a brief metal perspective, that is the task of the fast company, right?
Uh, uh,
Is Neo.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Coming up.
going to an embassy to get them out. So I think it's like, you know, the non-combatant, a Neo, and then respond outside of like Neos are more for uh hey, shit's about to get crazy. We're stopping the diplomatic mission, but there's no real threat at that time. Let's get them out, right? And a Neo perspective still is gonna fall, like I believe, fall to a Mu, right? That's located. They're gonna push the ARG there.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You got way
Yeah,
more support, right? A fast platoon deploys 44 dudes deep, and there is no support, right?
yeah,
There's no
yeah,
logistics, no stamina except for what you take with you. A Mew has I mean, it's a whole fucking Mew. They got all the support that they want.
yeah. And the fast teams that I saw on their deployments, there was one in Bahrain that I came across regularly. They stayed at like this. Their hotel was like Manaya Plaza or something, but they pretty much were charged with like the QRF for the ASU there in Bahrain
Mm-hmm.
back in the '90s, right? That's kind of how I looked at it. So talk about the hallway, right? So there, right there, I think it's a not it's not understanding, right? You have one way of doing business. Hey, I go in the house, that gun goes on fire, and I'm going to leave it on fire the whole time, right? My gun is not on fire until I'm up on target and I'm about to shoot, right? Maybe I PID as I come in and I'm kind of in the hunt. And I'm sorry I'm making so many SWAT hands right now. I'm going to get chewed up for that. I'm in the hunt, right? And as I'm like, yep, that's a gun. This guy's going to get the business. It goes on, roll safeties, and then engage. But then it's immediately, if there's nothing else that I'm not going to transition to, it's back on safe immediately, right? So I think that's a different mentality,
Right on.
right? And I don't think, honestly, like I know that is something I've heard from NSW, like, hey, it goes on fire and it stays on fire, right? Do you think that's a holdover from MP5 days?
Probably so.
Yeah, because I think, when we had MP5s, right, on the countdown, because of the way the safety was, I know the November models, you rolled the full auto and you stayed that way for pretty much the whole time, and that was something though that they quickly tried to figure out to modify those the safeties and weld little fucking like washers on them so you had the thumb rest.
Mm.
But I don't believe that's I don't believe that's where you want guys, like especially if we're putting information out into the YouTube, kind of the public sphere. Like would you promote that, like say, hey, you're gonna talk through guys that survival training, they want to come do some CQB? Would you have them go on fire and stay there?
Probably not.
I think it's just a difference of kind of different opinion, different experiences, right? So we go through the hallway, right? And the muzzling thing, that was like a big I think it seemed like you're pretty fired up about it. Like,
Well, so going back to folks that shared the video with me, and perception was, Stoke, man, this video shows the shit, the standard, something that I think that we need to try to get after. And so a lot of those conversations may or may not be directed to you and what we see here, but directed to folks out there maybe trying to think about how to implement any form or flavor of CQB at their place, in their location. And if you get into a mindset where you start training and you have habitual or non-habitual or accidental or negligent flagging other people, like, you're going to set yourself up for failure on this side of the house, if that makes sense.
Right. No, 100%. And I think that has to be right. There's weapon safety stuff, and a lot of that comes to like weapons on safe, right? You think of it in terms, law enforcement gets crazy with this, and they're the easiest ones to talk about, where they're like, "Don't flag your buddy, don't flag your buddy." I I understand that, and I support that 100%. You don't intentionally flag your buddy, but I also am gonna like I'm not gonna put the gun by my head to not flag him. I'll just kind of lower it, right? And that's a nonverbal. Hey, my finger's straight off the trigger. The gun is angled towards the ground.
Yeah.
If you need to pass in front of me, pass in front of me. Or that's the way I would move around people. But saying that, in law enforcement and guys that have big issues with the flagging thing, cops routinely point guns at people that they don't intend to shoot. So
Sure.
what is the fucking like why is everyone so scared of like flagging somebody? If you've got three cops in a fucking 10 by 10 room and they just cleared it and they're strong wall or whatever, and now they all want to leave, you don't think as those guns get lowered and they're coming out of the door, right? Their fingers are straight off the trigger, that those muzzles don't come across feet or whatever. And this is where I think is a good discussion, because it's like, yeah, I don't think you should flag anybody ever. I think that's the goal. You're always going to work to that, right? But is there a time where somebody's going to cross in front of it?
Shit happens.
Right. So that now, how do I need to handle that in a fast dynamic thing, right? There's kind of twofold, right? I need to be really engaged in what's happening and kind of reading the situation, right? Like we're the guy that's standing in the doorway, you kind of you critique him on engaging from the fatal funnel, right? What he presented was that what was presented to him was the classic hostage shot,
Yeah.
right? And I support the decisions he made. He came up there, he lit it up. He's in the hunt. He sees the hostage. He sees one guy, another one, a gun. He takes a little bit of a pause to see, is the geometry working out right? Because a lot of times I've seen, kind of the trick fuck moves where the hostage taker is in front of the hostage with the gun behind. Like it's kind of like, hey, are you actually paying attention? And that's kind of a fuck with you training thing that they would do. But he takes time, right? And then he has to deliver, the very low percentage shot on there. At that point, I'm backed up off of him. He goes into the room. I'm lighting it. You see, like, oh, and you said, there he goes, right in front of the muzzle again. But for me, what I saw, I was like, yep, he's going to cross in front of me. I deactivated my light, lowered my gun down. He walked in front, and then I immediately came back up and put it on the unknown and to get him out of there. And that's kind of where that video ended, right? So one of the things you said, like, why would you engage from the fatal funnel? And I wanted to ask you, like, how could he have done that differently, in your opinion?
Well, as I recall, it was a pretty restricted room, pretty small. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bedroom. I mean, American, but 10 by 10 maybe, with a bed, with furniture.
Yeah, I mean, so when you walk in, and that's the thing, right? You walk into a room and you have no idea what's going to be in the room, and everything in there, furniture or anything else, you're going to have to make immediate on the spot decisions for, right? Um, of course, the classic example or the standard answer would be clear the doorway, clear your corner, sweep the, but obviously there's a lot of things that are moving fast and you're reacting to. So I don't know. You tell me. What were
So
some lessons whole thing that could have been done better?
Um, so that one actually we got kind of like good remarks afterwards on it, based off of all the other 8 teams that ran through it. So it was the hit like what could have been better. Like we obviously could have been a little bit tighter. I believe it could have been a little quicker, right? The hang up in the T shape, right? 4 or 5 seconds. I mean, you're talking about an evolution that from start to finish was maybe 25 seconds long,
Yeah,
right? From the time we walk in there till the time I'm actually doing the bona fides. That's not on the camera. Doing the bona fides with the PC was like 30 seconds. So I think we could have been a little bit tighter in the big room, right? But we had some furniture and some obstacles that guys were trying to going up over tables, right? And then that was one of the I think internal things like, hey, shooting platform, could you have engaged? He's like, no, I could have engaged anyway because the angle wasn't there, right? That was a fight really for 1, 3, and 5 at that doorway. And I think we could have been better at that. But I think the light use was good, right? So the guy that tried to engage us from the doorway, I think he shot 2 or 3 rounds, but nobody got hit, right? Because he was trying to aim at one thing and he had lights on him from the other thing, and then they started hitting him and they were hitting the door jam and the rifle, and that's when I turned on him and I had the most deliberate view on him. So I think like that stuff could be tightened up. Shots were fine. Obviously, a PC wasn't hit or anything like that, so that's mission success.
yeah,
Um, you know, so I don't think it was like a perfect run in any way, but I also think it was pretty decent.
yeah.
You know, um, in terms of that. But it's to me, it's like one of the things you say, like, hey, if this is these guys or whatever, like, and I really hope it's not like this can't be the thing, like these guys are, and you said it, like 50 shades of fucked up. And to be honest, like that doesn't bother me. It doesn't. It's like, I just think it's like, is it 50 shades of fucked up because we have different backgrounds or different experiences, or was it specifically 50 shades of fucked up? Like even
Well, I, I, I would still take things back. I think to um, a a couple things, I guess, because it's hard to answer things uh, that are more relatable to you from your side and your perspective going through. Because I don't know from my end and my perspective what until we had this conversation what the actual purpose of the event was, right? And who the role players were, because that kind of changes a few things, and what the actual who is the audience for the event, and what was the purpose for the video. So there's a lot of things ultimately I don't have honestly got answers for. So when I look at things, I guess from a you call it a big army perspective, right? Which I'm sure all the dudes love to hate. I go back to thinking about the training value and how dudes watching uh, this sort of training video can walk away maybe thinking a few things. And one of the things that I think about is dudes going to NTC or JRTC, right? Brigades going down to get tested before they go to the box. Well, every single time uh, they either win straight up or they get reset because some commander fucked up and they get reoriented in order for them to be able to win. So think about your role players. They're firing back at you, right? What would have happened, because there's always risk mitigation in there. Like even though like you're not wearing a mask, for the role player side of the house, there is risk mitigation. Like I am sure that there was a brief that said, if you get shot, you better fucking go down because they're going to steamroll over you if you don't.
Yeah, so what they're told, hey, they're going to shoot you 3 to 5 times, and they're going to shoot you lower in the torso, right? That's where they're going to engage. And what they're told, if you do not react to getting shot, he is going to pick parts. And the hit right after that one, we went same thing at cop. I tagged him 3 times from outside the structure. And when I made entry into the room, he decided he was going to put a couple paintballs into my side. So as I transitioned back to him, what I saw was exposed ear, exposed neck, and I dumped about 6 rounds into his ear. He presented the top of the head, and as I left the room, I gave him 5 or 6 more into his head. And that guy wanted to fight on our exfil HLZ. And by all means, we stopped. I came back, and it's like, yeah, hey, if you want to talk about this, understand that I put 5 70 grain rounds into your chest, right? React to that. If you don't, then I'm gonna put now. We're playing paintball. I'm a better paintball player than you, dude.
Yeah.
I'm better at everything than you. So I'm gonna put the bullets exactly where I want them to go. This gun doesn't recoil, and you better believe I can do that really fucking fast.
Right.
And so they're told that. But what I find most most often, right, and this goes into like real application and and um and also the training application. If I'm doing like things at a hostage rescue pace, or I'm just, even if I'm using, kind of a combat clearance, but the movement through the structure or into the room, I change the doorway, the sequence of the technique I'm going to use for the doorway, or I'm going to try to process more of the room from the outside, but the entrance into the room is the same. What the goal is, I need to make shit happen from an adversarial standpoint faster than real life, right? If they perceive I can get to the back of this house in 15 seconds, I need to get there in 10.
Sure.
That's to me, that's me using speed as the multiplier that it is, or the modifier that it is, right? Surprise is gone.
Yeah.
Now I think we unknowingly, by the way this folded out, right? The decisions were made. Hey, if we hit this as a tube, it's going to be much better than if we come in the middle and we have to split stack and we're sending a team to the right, to the left. I can keep my team together for longer if I go to that open door. And when we did that, as soon as we stepped in there, we regained surprise back because they weren't expecting us to go there. The guy in the corner was looking at the doorway, thinking we're going to come through a closed doorway. And when the team came into the door off, you see him, he just shrugs up and freezes, right?
Yeah.
And then the same thing with that. So we using speed to our advantage, we actually gained back a little bit of surprise. And then once we got into the big dark room, it kind of all, went to shit for that one, right? Then they know we're kind of at a choke point. We can only go through one thing. Now it's just a matter of violence of action. Like, can we put our bullets where we want them to go faster than the adversary? And that's kind of the goal. I think the overarching goal of what we were looking at for that. But I think in terms of what happens all the time, right? In the civilian world, especially, right? Civilians love to gravitate towards, a guy like yourself or other guys, other former veterans. Hey, I've got CQB, because you said in your initial kind of the bio data of that video, right, that you have more operational and organizational experience doing CQB than kind of anything else that you had done, right? So when people hear that, it's like, okay, cool. That's a pretty bona fide, right, line on the resume, right? This is where the bulk of your training and development resides, in understanding of information is in CQB, right? That's how I took that statement. So when guys hear that, but really in reality, it's like you had a 6-week CQB class, right? Or is that how long the shooting package is?
CQB school itself is 6 weeks. Yeah.
It is 6 weeks long, and then that's it. That is did you ever go through another like, did you go to Sephardic or another like CQB school?
No.
Right. And I think, like, for my initial response, to that, it's like, okay, there's experience there. I would say there is a level of experience, but the currency on it is super low, right? We deal with like experience and currency. You can be experienced. Hey, I did this for 20 years, but I haven't done it for the last 10 years. So
Sure.
experience is through the roof, currency is super fucking low. Or guys that say, I've only been doing this for a year, right? But I do it every single day for 8 hours a day. Okay, well, the experience is low, but the currency is high, right? This guy's going to be polished, at least for what he knows. Um, and then you have guys that were like, at the unit, it was 10 sessions a week, right? Relentless schedule, AM and PM, Monday through Friday. You're either on the range or in CQB.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, imagine doing that over like I consider myself, I was a visitor there. I was there for 12 years. There were guys that were working there when I showed up that had been there for 5 or 6 years, that when I retired, they were still on active duty there. Right.
Yeah.
So now you think of like, what do you think in terms of experience versus currency when a guy's been doing this 10 sessions a week for over a decade, right?
Oh
With
yeah.
with with no resourcing problems, right? Anything he wants, he gets.
Right.
Multiple venues, none of it is not live fire CQB, right? If you go off site and you're training, yes, it's sims, force on force, sims against paper, but the bulk of the training that we're doing, it's
In your own
full
life.
360. Yeah, you're blowing, you know, 40, 50 charges a week, right? External breaches, internal breaches, right? It's kind of sky's the limit in terms of training. So I think that's important to understand. Like, as I like the conversations, man, and I hope you don't feel like it's not a dig on you, but it would be, I look at it's the same way if I watch some Neil deGrasse Tyson videos and then I try to engage him in a debate about what he's been working on his whole life.
Do you think that he would engage you?
I think he would. I think he would say he would probably say correct me on a lot of things like, hey, that's not, but it would just show like I could
You actually
what?
think he posted something on Instagram and said, "Yo, Neil, the world is flat." That Neil
Oh,
would reach out and say, "Hey, man, let's have a conversation."
no, probably not.
Probably
I don't
not.
think he would.
So
But
I'm glad we've had this conversation, and I think it's been open and very respectful. I hope both ways, because I see that we're only going down to 2 minutes, or a couple minutes, anyways. But why did you feel to have this conversation? Like,
because I'm in the training world, right? In the training space. And one of the things I watched for over a decade when I wasn't on social media, right? I would get videos sent to me, and the amount of what I perceive, this is Matt's view, of just bad information, there's way more than there is good. Or when you have guys that are self-promoted like subject matter experts that have virtually no experience in what they're teaching, right? It's an experience. So I think it's valuable to where I've engaged, like you're not the anybody. It's like, hey, let's do a live about it. I like the live conversation because there's nowhere it's unscripted,
yeah,
right? I do it the same thing. I called you. I was like, hey, is there anything that's off limits? What don't you want to talk about? Like, I don't want it to be it's not like a fuck off session, but I think the conversation is good because when the conversation happens in the comment section, it usually stops like, well, you just don't understand the context. It's like, well, hey, motherfucker, I didn't make the video. The context I have to go on is what you put out, right? So I that's why I reached out to you, and it was actually guys like, hey, do you want me to see if he has a live? It's like, yeah, what's your IG? I think on IG gave you my number, and I was like, hey, you made a video, you've got some strong opinions. I have some opinions about that video. I think a conversation would be worthwhile, right? And
I hope,
and and think
I said I hope it was.
yeah, I hope it was. I mean, guys that were listening, we'll see. But they're gonna cut us off, Bill. I really appreciate you doing it. I'm gonna hang this one on Instagram for a couple days. See what happens with it. Guys can watch it, dude. I really appreciate you reaching out. And I've been like stalking your page, a lot of the survival stuff because I'm kind of into that too. It's interesting. But thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it, dude. Hope the guys that were listening that stayed with it, found it worthwhile. And Bill, if you ever need anything from me, dude, you got my number. Hit me up.
Same to you, brother.
All right, man. Take it easy.